Are you ready? It's coast to coast, we're here and we representing Tom Joyner Foundation. We about to jump right in it. Everybody is woke. HBCUs, let's go. Tradition, trendsetting. Let's do it for the culture. HBCUbiquity.
Welcome to HBCUbiquity. I'm your host, Thomas Joyner Jr. Question or questions. And I asked these in the previous episode about the state of HBCUs, but I want to ask them again, but in a different context. So here goes. First, what HBCU did you attend? Second, what are your thoughts and impressions of the president when you were in college, or of the current president of your alma mater today? Third, speaking of today, what's going on at your alma mater these days? This week's conversations will be with two HBCU presidents that are part of a new generation of leaders that are utilizing their institutions to transform and uplift not only their students, but their surrounding communities as well. So, as an intro to the first conversation, I've known Dr. Hermon J. Felton since his days as president of Wilberforce University. And after leading that HBCU for a few years, I was fortunate to attend his inauguration as the 17th president of Wiley College. And that was just a few months ago. But it was there that I met another young New Jack president that I've been hearing about a lot recently. And his name is Dr. Hakim Lucas, president of Virginia Union University. Oh, and by the way, Virginia Union is a Tom Joyner Foundation School of the Month for February 2019. And Dr. Lucas will be the second interview in today's conversations. So I'm trying to keep this intro short, as both of my conversations with Dr. Felton and Dr. Lucas are packed with info about their institutions and what these institutions are doing in and for their communities. But these conversations also delve into some of the out-of-the-box concepts about the state and direction of HBCUs and why we as alums and or HBCU supporters need to be as steadfast as ever in maintaining and ensuring the longevity of our schools. So Wildcats and Panthers, represent for your schools on HBCUbiquity social media. And everybody else, please chime in with your thoughts and feedback on these conversations. HBCUbiquity, HBCUbiquity on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you for listening today, and let's get started. Welcome to HBCUbiquity.
Before we get back to the HBCUbiquity podcast, let's take a look at some Tom Joyner Foundation fundraising highlights. Here's an example of TJF's success.
Hi, my name is Dante Webb, a junior majoring in physics at Dillard University. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Dillard University Dallas Alumni Chapter and Tom Joyner Foundation for providing me with this scholarship. After graduation, I will attend Georgia Tech to obtain my master's in mechanical engineering.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Welcome back to HBCUbiquity. I'm joined now by the former president of Wilberforce University, now the 17th president of Wiley College, Dr. Hermon Felton. Dr. Felton, how's everything at Wiley this summer?
Everything is hot. Everything is good. You know, East Texas is surprisingly hot, brother.
Yeah, heat index of 110 out here in Dallas on yesterday.
Right. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. But you've been in that space much longer than I have. So.
Well, Dr. Felton, Wiley has a long and very unique history, not just among Texas HBCUs, but among HBCUs in general. So for the benefit of our listening audience that may not know, can you touch upon some of the highlights of Wiley's 146-year history?
Sure. You know, the history of Wiley is replete with a lot of firsts, a lot of things that may not surprise folks. But what I would like to impress is how our history, our existence is woven into Americana. You can't have America without HBCUs. And certainly we feel that Wiley has done a pretty good job. I'll just touch on a few things, starting with Sweat v. Painter. Heman Sweat, it was a graduate of Wiley College, and he sued the University of Texas Law School for integration. And what came out of that was an agreement to build a similarly situated law school, which is now known as Thurgood Marshall at Texas Southern, and referred commonly as the house that Sweat built. But what's important about that is Sweat v. Painter is a case and maybe one of the foundational cases used to argue Brown v. Board of Education. And so that type of activism is something that has been instilled in Wileyites from day one. One of the big six core, James Farmer, is a Wiley grad. He founded the Congress on Racial Equality, and the work that he did, arguably is woven into the civil rights movement as well. And of course, people know about the great debaters, and we're forever grateful for the work that Denzel Washington, who has not only revived the story, but today is still a giver, a contributor to the college. And Nate Parker is on the board, has been for some 10, 11 years. The Great Debaters are an amazing story about what can happen when opportunity meets access. Today we're still pumping out, activists. We have a young lady who is just finishing her Fulbright scholar.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Scholarship. Yeah. So Tamara Hill is just coming back from Greece after spending a year abroad. And so, that is who Wiley is, a liberal arts institution affiliated with the United Methodist Church, unapologetically serious about creating change agents.
So how is your second HBCU presidency going so far?
I have to tell you, I'm grateful to be in this space. First of all, there's, nothing like laboring in this space. Wilberforce University was an opportunity of a lifetime. The challenges that we faced at Wilberforce just prepared me to come into the door with a confidence, knowing that there's not much you can throw at me that would rattle me.
Okay, so with that said, then does that mean you own a cowboy hat and some boots?
You are not likely to catch me in a cowboy hat, but I am. The boots are growing on me. I don't have a pair of them yet, but I can see myself wearing a pair of them. But you won't catch me with anything other than the Yankees fitted cap on.
Yankees fitted cap, but
yes, sir.
Tupac over Biggie.
Biggie. And I'm going to go with Biggie because I'm more of a storyteller than a poet. And I think Tupac was just powerful, both of them. Like, you can't go wrong with either one of those dudes. But what resonated with me was the storytelling that Biggie did. Just so vivid and just smooth. And he always found melodic tunes to lay down, beats to lay down those bars with, man. So I'm a Biggie over Tupac, but a Jay-Z over all of them.
Okay. I was with you for a minute, on the Biggie storytelling, but we'll say that for another conversation. But Hermon, going back to your days at Wilberforce, and I got to ask this, not just for the benefit of our listeners, but for mine as well. Mm-hmm. What are some of the differences, especially cultural differences, between northern HBCUs and southern HBCUs?
That's a really good question. And I believe that there is just a slight nuance. I would say that in the South, because our schools are more prevalent, I think the culture, the history, the civil rights largely happened down in the South. And I think the understanding of why those institutions were founded is more palatable in the South. So I think you find a little more empathy that is favorable to the plight of our institutions, and thereby finds us with a little more support. Up north, and I'll just say Wilberforce, it was very rural. And other than having industry, being in the Rust Belt, it was secluded and not really close to anything else other than Central, which was right across the street from it. But we were still out a ways. And in the South, the pageantry of bands and J-Set and homecomings are just a little, I think, different. The Midwest, I won't say the North, because the North, I guess you would have to include, Virginia State, Norfolk State, and Howard, etc. Those are, I think, you get a similar feel as you would down south, but I think it has more to do with the clientele that comes. Most of your kids are going to be in the southern spaces. They're going to be from down south, I think, in the middle part of America, and they come with an understanding of what the HBCU space is. I still believe that those who attend HBCUs, regardless of where they come from and where the HBCU is located, are just as passionate about their HBCUs. But I do find the culture to be different, and I think I would lay on the support of the community more than anything else. The support of the community in the South is a lot better, I think, than that up north.
Okay. So, Hermon, as a new Jack president, so to speak, who are some of your HBCU presidential peers, past or present, that you look to for inspiration and or advice?
Man, there's about 8 or 9 of us that we talk. So I like to. I'm kind of one of those dudes that's cool with everybody. So I've got the old heads, the Hayward Stricklands, Billy Hawkins, my mentor, who you know really well, Dr. Jimmy Jenkins.
Oh yeah.
Beverly Hogan, Larry Irvin, and the Queen, Dr. Dorothy Yancey. So that's the sage in the village. And then you have guys like Michael Sorrell, Colette Pierce Burnett, and Rosalind Clark Artist, and even Cassidy DeBroy, who was at Shaw, Kevin Rome, Philanders, Roderick's mother, Michael Sorrell. All of us are on a group text, and that group text is off the chain. We support one another. We find solutions to our challenges. Then you have brothers like Warmack, Makola Abdul. I mean, I know and like a whole bunch of them. There's a ton of people that I need answers. I find those answers. Walter Kimbrough, when I had to shut down this Greek problem I had, first person I called was Walter Kimbrough, who is the hip hop president, and I called him just to make sure what I was getting ready to do was sound. But we do that often. So I there's a good 20, 35 people, man, that I rock with really well. And of course, George French, a partner of mine who we started a foundation together. He and Alfred Anthony Pinkard, the current president of Wilberforce, we're all good friends. So I'm all over the place with presidents, man. I haven't met one I didn't like.
Well, it sounds like from that group text that you guys are pretty Kappa heavy.
Well, there are some noobs. We do like that. The noobs are doing their thing, but those damn alphas, man, they are everywhere. No, they're the alphas. I think probably are leading in the head count, and we might be pretty close, but they're a great deal of Qs. Your dad's fraternity brothers are representing as well. So.
Yeah, especially in the old head group that you mentioned at first. Yes,
it's all of them. That seemed like that was a part of rather a prerequisite to be a college president was to be a damn Q.
Yeah. So Hermon, as a new president for a new generation of students, what are some examples, if any, of the challenges that you face in your careers as president that, say, your older mentors didn't?
Our kids now have a different set of challenges. I think, the challenges that they met were still challenges, not to be diminished. But I think now what we're dealing with, the LGBTQ, the inclusion, you talk about gender, class. The one thing that I have always been fascinated with, and I became fascinated with it in law school, was the cast of Black folks. Like I'm a product of poverty, and I went into the Marine Corps, and so I was still around working class folks. And it wasn't until I got in law school did I ever meet, a rich Black person. And so the cast in dealing with the challenges, some would say entitlement, dealing with poverty, dealing with mental health challenges. I would say the two largest or three: the mental health, the debt, the crushing debt that faces them, and the social and emotional intelligence, or lack thereof, that most of our students come with, because technology has made it so comfortable for us to be inclusive, or rather exclusive, that folks, these kids will walk straight past you nowadays. And I'll give you a great example. All my students have my cell phone number, a great deal of them, and they will text and go straight into a question. Now, you haven't said hello, good afternoon, or anything. And so I constantly start my conversations with students with hello, period, as a response to whatever it is that they're asking for. And then they'll back up and say, oh, okay, my bad. I'm sorry. I apologize. But the basic soft skills that separate the smart people from the very smart people are a challenge that I don't think we really grapple with enough. That emotional intelligence, knowing what to say, knowing when to put a filter on, when to take the filter off, where to do that. That's a huge challenge as I see it, brother. A huge challenge.
I agree. And I want to stay on this topic for a quick second, because both of us have children that are around the same age or same age groups. How do you grapple with that at home in terms of what you see now and teaching your children those soft skills so that they do not end up in that position or in those kind of circumstances 10 years from now?
My mom was a single mom, raised 6 of us in the projects. So, we were disciplined, and sometimes the I was enough. While I have not had to really physically hurt, harm, or injure any of my children, I do not play. So there are some standards that are just non-negotiable. Like being respectful to all adults, black, white, brown, green, or yellow. Looking people in their eyes, being respectful and courteous, understanding that you are blessed and that nothing is owed to you. A work ethic is the only ethic that matters, a good one. And honesty, those things that had to be beat into me personally, because I didn't believe them when I coming up as a child. But those things still matter, and I think those are the things that separate kids. When all things are equal, if you've got 2 smart kids and one of them is socially, has great acumen socially and emotionally, you're all day long going to pick that person to be a part of your team, your staff, etc. And so I've always really focused on the things that my mom did, unbeknownst to what she was doing, and she was creating a cultural a capital, cultural capital that dictated that we exercise good, stupid common sense. That's just a plain old common sense. And I think that's lacking nowadays. And I'm not broad brushing. I want to be clear about that. All of these aren't all the students, but it's too many of our students.
I understand.
It actually helps me as a parent because I get to see how these kids, the challenges that I deal with on a daily basis, it keeps the issues in the forefront for me. So I get to talk to my kids about those things to keep them on the cue.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Dr. Hermon Felton, for those that don't know, your story is basically a true American success story. And with that said, HBCUs are known for the close attention and family-like support that faculty and staff deliver to their students. So how did that kind of environment, and if you can touch upon also the mentoring of Dr. Jimmy Jenkins when you were at Edward Waters, how that kind of environment contribute to your career currently in higher education?
Man, listen, I was I just gotten out of the Marine Corps and was working at the post office, and I knew that there was something more. So I went down to this community college. It was called FCJ at the time, FJC, Florida Junior College. And there was a recruiter from Edward Waters there. And he said, man, you need to go to a black college. I'm like, I don't know if I can get into it. I went with him, long story short. They accepted me. Now, I'm a high school dropout, or not dropout, stop out. Got a GED. And, I'm dyslexic to this day. And when I left high school, the grades were awful. 1.26 GPA, 420 out of 460, I think, class ranking. And so the skill set that most of the kids that were coming in, I was way behind. But Edward Waters College saw something different. They saw capacity. They saw potential. And they gave me an opportunity. And I did nothing but flourish there because of the environment. Dr. Hooker, who was my 8th grade dean of boys at Southside Junior High in Jacksonville, all he said to me when I was a kid was, dial 9 and get your mama on the phone. And that was the precursor to the 3 SWATs that you were getting, because I was in his office all the time. Dial 9, get your mama on the phone. You need to be something. Well, he turned out to be my history professor at Edward Waters College. The first day we saw each other, we cried. He cried because he said, I just knew that you were going to be like all the rest of them. And I'm so happy to see you here. And I cried because, it was one of the first times that a black man had put his arms around me and said something affirming, And so that environment at Edward Waters College, being small, nurtured me. I remember speaking broken English in the registrar's office, and the administrative assistant said to me, you need to go out that door, figure out how to say what you need to say, and come back in here. From that point on, I was cognizant of every sentence I spoke, and I was taught how to, the little things, how to eat, at a 4-star dining facility or whatever. Those things that we got because it was 1,200 students and the teacher ratio was 1 to 18, 1 to 25. But we were in the hood in Jacksonville. We were all we had. And excellence was what mattered. There was no other standard. All of that propelled me for heights that I had no idea I was on my way to climbing. And so Jimmy Jenkins, being their SGA president, he took me aside and said, you need to raise money. You need to learn how to raise money if you want to be a college president. And I wanted to be a college president because of my first board meeting as the SGA president. And the board was grappling with changing the enrollment. And they wanted to create a better student profile. And they went one by one making their case. And Dr. Jenkins, you know him, stood up after each one of them and eloquently slayed them. And he tied in the mission, the charge we have to keep, and more importantly, do you want to see these little boys at the gas station at 12 o'clock at night, or would you rather see them in the boardrooms and the corporate offices? And everybody
Hermon, for those that don't know, Jimmy Jenkins is also a minister as well, so he can definitely eloquently slay any argument that comes up. Just want to interject that for those that did not know.
Yeah. Dr. Jenkins, who's the current president at Livingstone College, was my undergraduate president, and I turned out work for him too. But he, and once I saw him fight for the least of us, for me, because if they change those standards, if there wasn't an open door allotment at Edward Waters, I would not have been able to get into that joint. So that happened for me. And then he sent me on to law school. And he told me to go cut my teeth as a fundraiser, to teach, to learn everything I could. And then he brought me back to Edward Waters. I'm at Livingstone College. And it was brutal working for him. And if you've ever, and I guarantee you will understand what I'm about to say now. Working for your mentor, in your case, your dad, is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
It's great because you know them, and it is hell because you know them.
Yep.
Everything you get, people assume you got it by proxy of your birth or your last name, and they don't understand how internally you are wired to make sure that you do exceedingly more than anybody else so that you can fight that stigma. And so I had to do that every time. I got promoted 4 or 5 times with him. And it wasn't because I was his guy. It was brutal working for him. But I studied him. I knew him. I knew, more importantly, what he expected of me. And I fought to exceed that every day. And that's why I'm a president now. It's not because of anything that I did. It was because of the position that he put me in and the expectation that he had. And he instilled that expectation in me as a freshman in Bridge when he looked at me. Well, he was looking at everybody else, but I felt like he was only looking at me and said, there is absolutely nothing that you can't do. And because of that, I will accept mediocrity not one day while you're around me. I will never forget those words. And so that's a type of pressure that I have been under all my professional career in higher education. And I would submit to you that it has worked well for me.
Yeah. So having been a student at both an HBCU and the PWI environments, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in terms of best practices for student success that you're currently applying at Wiley College?
So they talk about intrusive and intrusive advisement now, like it's a new thing. HBCUs have been doing intrusive advisement from day one. We've been going to get people out of the dorms. We've been, having kids at our dinner tables and talking to them and moving them through processes. The advisement thing, we've been doing it and do it better than most. When you talk about best practices, I always say best practices for who? there's a standard that society says that in optimal situations, if you apply X, then Z will happen. Well, we ain't in no damn optimal situations all the time. We come with students who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay their debt down, who come from failing public education systems, and we've got to get them where they need to go, kicking and screaming, whether they want to come or not. We know what's best for them. So, you look at industry standards and practices that are mandated by the professional organizations, but fluidity is what makes HBCUs great. That secret sauce, you can't explain it. It's just what happens. Most of the people that work there are missionary in spirit. Yeah. And so we do everything else outside of what society says or industry standards says. You got to touch a student 4 times a week. You got to find advisement. No, sir. We're going to catch them in the calf, ask them how they're doing. If you're walking slow, we know, and it's the springtime, we know what's going on. We're going to give you a little reprieve. If you're walking slow at a certain period of time in the fall, we know what's going on. You come to class looking to shovel. You're probably online or doing like we know these things because the majority of the people at HBCUs are ingrained in the culture and they're invested in the success of the students. And that, to me, trumps industry standards that are dictated as societal norms that will bring about success if you apply them.
Okay. So as a current president of Wiley, you're filling some very big shoes in succeeding Dr. Haywood Strickland, who we mentioned earlier. And for the benefit of our listeners that may not know, can you touch upon his impact at Wiley, as well as how you plan to continue or distinguish yourself from his legacy?
Man, listen, for 18 years, you can't go anywhere for 18 years and not have done a lot of things right. Right. He's built some iconic programs, and he's restored the educational, I think, quality in the liberal arts program. Our a cappella choir is world renowned. They've done scores on the great debaters. They've on Nat Turner, the movie with Nate Parker. They have sung at the White House and have appeared in Japan. That a cappella choir, still is unique in that it focuses on Negro spirituals. And so they can do gospel, but if you want to get your head knocked off with some old Negro hymns that got our ancestors and our uncles and grandparents through some trying times, you can come on Tuesday at chapel. Every Tuesday we shut down the entire campus, and our a cappella choir gives us something to be proud of and something to reflect on, as well as the great debaters. But he also started the Second Chance Pell program. We were one of 9 schools in the nation that we are educating inmates. And we've been doing that for 3 years, and I will continue to do that. When you talk about redemptive grace and restorative justice, I think rehabilitation requires that you teach a man to fish. Right. And so a man and a woman to fish. And so we're honored to be doing that work. And we're super excited to have started the Heman Sweat Center for Social Good and Leadership. I think 3 of the things that the Black community can benefit from that is strengthened is leadership, our understanding of social good, and entrepreneurship. If we have more of that in our space as a Black community, I think we're great. We're uniquely set up to really make an impact in the social good and the leadership space. And I'm not going to even touch the entrepreneurial piece. We do have a minor in that, but we're going to focus on what Wiley has been doing for 147 years, and that's providing strong leaders and touching and making our imprint in the space of social good. And that's really rooted in the fact that, James Farmer and so many of our graduates have given their lives and committed their work to social good and equality for every human being that graces this earth.
Let's stay on the topic for a quick second here, because Wiley College is located in Marshall, Texas, and for those that don't know, Marshall is about halfway between, say, Tyler, Texas, and Shreveport. So it's rural, and Marshall is kind of a small town, but an institution with the history and legacy of Wiley becomes a pillar in that community. So with that said, how is Wiley addressing the educational, the economic, and the social challenges that are facing young African Americans in that part of East Texas?
I want to brag on the city of Marshall.
Good.
Marshall has its challenges. There are some economic disparities there. There are some educational challenges. We have members on our board who are citizens of Marshall, and their pigmentation does not look like ours. Mm-hmm. And yet, they have, in the last 2 years, have given for almost $5 million to the college. What I think is unique about the city of Marshall is it is, largely white, and they embrace a Black college. We are not an afterthought. I'm included on every, just about every decision-making cabinet or council in that city. We don't have just the perfunctory relationships. There are substantial conversations that are being had. And I was just in one where I reminded them that Marshall will not be as great as she can if the West End, or Newtown, which is where Wiley sits, if Newtown isn't as great as the rest of Marshall. And they embrace that. And, we do our part by hosting free clinics. We have a science camp going on right now that is free to the citizens right there in the Newtown area. We did athletic camps this summer for the first time in a while that were free: basketball, volleyball, baseball. Like, we know that to be in the community, you have to be of the community.
Right.
And I think Marshall recognizes Wiley's contributions in a way that, I'm around the HBCU space, and I think it's really unique. And I won't compare it to anybody else, but I think it's really special, the way the colleges embrace and how we're working to address the economic disparities, the housing and disparities, and the educational disparities.
All right. So with that said, and in closing, Hermon, what's next for Wiley then?
We're just going to be who we are, who we always been, without fanfare, right in Marshall, just simply doing the work. We hope to continue to produce Fulbright scholars, great athletes, great debaters, great activists, and great vocalists. That's who we are. That premier liberal arts education is what we want to continue to provide. But we also want to make sure that we're pushing out change agents who understand civically, emotionally, spiritually, that they have an obligation to be a part of the solution. That our country has devolved, and there's no secret. Yeah. And I'm hoping that Wiley and our students out of our Human Sweat Center for Social Good are going to be able to be the catalyst and leading conversations that are difficult and making change that we all can be a proud of in America.
And before we sign off, I want to just make sure that our listeners who may not be aware, I don't want to emphasize a point that you made a few minutes ago. For those that have not checked out the Wiley College a cappella choir, because I have several times over the years, YouTube them, Google them. They are really, truly worth hearing, especially to hear the old spirituals, but to just hear HBCU excellence, basically.
And young people with a joy for Jesus.
Yeah.
That's some beautiful stuff, man.
Well, Dr. Hermon J. Felton, thank you for your time today. Thank you for this conversation.
Hey, let me say this in closing.
Yeah.
The work that your father did, does, and continue to do is some major stuff. And I want to use another adjective to describe it. But the work that he's done in committing himself and your family to the HBCU space, I don't think is uplifted enough. But I want you to know that we recognize at Wiley the work, the thousands of students that your father and his foundation, the work that you all have done, have provided. And you should know, as my good friend Colette Pierce-Brunette says, we graduate families and we change generations. And your father, the foundation, and the impact that they have, I think, is unquantifiable because you have no idea how many generations you've changed with your support. And I am one of them. I'm recipient of several thousands of dollars while at Edward Waters College. And those things, those scholarships came in hand and have invariably changed the trajectory of my entire family. And I mean, my brothers and sisters, we all started going to college after I went to college. And now all of our nieces, all of my mother's grandkids are college educated. So we go from, her generation of blue collar, not having high school graduates, to us, me and my brothers and sisters being college graduates, and our kids, without question, on pace to exceed everything that we've done. So know that you are change agents, and your father should know that every day.
Hey, kind words are very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Oh, man.
You have a great day, and we'll be back with more HBCUbiquity.
Before we get back to the HBCUbiquity podcast, let's take a look at some Tom Joyner Foundation fundraising highlights. Here's an example of TJF's success.
My name is Connor Daly. I'm a sophomore at Dillon University, majoring in urban studies and public policy from Chicago, Illinois. I'm grateful for the scholarship from the Dillon University National Alumni Association and the Tom Joyner Foundation. After graduating from Dillon University, I plan to go to graduate school and receive a master's degree in public administration.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Thomas Joyner Jr. here with HBCUbiquity, talking with Dr. Hakim Lucas, president of Virginia Union University today. How's it going?
Hey, good morning. How are you doing, Brother Joyner Jr.?
Doing well. So let's get started here. As the 13th president of Virginia Union University, what is your vision for ensuring future success for your students?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, and I'm very excited about Virginia Union University being a Tom Joyner School of the Month. The work that you all are doing for HBCUs and promoting us is unprecedented, and it is extremely needed in our space today. So first, let me say that. The second is a comment about vision. I am very, very excited about being able to lead innovative, creative universities such as Virginia Union University that for 150 years has prided itself on being at the nexus and forefront of social justice and ultimate leadership development of young people between the ages of 18 and 25. Over the last 154 years, we've also evolved into the graduate level space in education through a master's in curriculum and teaching and a master's of divinity, master's in Christian education, and ultimately a doctoral in ministry. That allows us to get into adult education. A vision for Virginia Union University based on our historic mission revolves around our ability to first help young African-American students identify purpose and passion. Once they identify purpose and passion, our goal then is to encircle them with what we call a circle of support to help them create a guided pathway to whatever the career through workforce development, internships, athletic programs, community service projects, other forms of civic engagement, and also academic integration. We then guide them to a career of leadership and service. Ultimately, our vision is to take students that are considered underperformers and waken them to what we call a promise of a limitless future.
You mentioned earlier in that remark about social justice and leadership for the next generation as the hallmarks of what Virginia Union is accomplishing. Social justice and leadership for the next generation have a higher meaning right now than they have in the last 40 years. Tell me about what all Virginia Union is doing to fill that space, especially, in this day of social and political climate.
Well, social justice is, if you will, a broad word and a term that for us at Virginia Union, I've tried to narrow down into what I believe is a historic statement about the history of African Americans, particularly our struggle on these shores in the U.S. since 1619. I like to say education is my social justice, right? And so the first thing is social justice is our ability to use our lives to express loudly our freedom. And so the first place that we want students to, if you will, activate or participate in social justice is in their academic excellence, right? In their pursuit, right? Don't take the opportunity to be in college as something that is a given right, but to understand that this is something that your ancestors fought for, they bled for, they were hosed for, they were bit and barked at by dogs for, that there was legislation that said we could not do it. And living out our social justice is honoring the classroom and the academic opportunity. The second phase of social justice formation at Virginia Union University is not just having your presence and saying that my body here means something and that I'm going to produce a body of work that represents the ancestors and the shoulders I stand on. The second is developing your voice. That the worst thing that you can do today in this society is to be silent. That you have to put your voice to your presence. And that's why from our student government association leadership to our students in various programs, that everybody should have an opinion about something that's happening in their local community, in their region, or in our national space, and globally when necessary to also provide some understanding and participation. The third and the last phase of emergence of this social justice ideal is to get involved, right? You can't be upset at how things are going or the leaders that we have if you're not voting, if you're not engaged in some type of organization, whether it's National Association for Colored People, Urban League, whether it's 100 Black Men, 100 Black Women, whether it's a National Council of Negro Women, whatever it is, get involved, sororities, fraternities, and it's through that consistent civic engagement and social justice that we make things work.
Okay. You also mentioned in that answer about focus on adult education. Some people call those non-traditional students.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I think that what we find is, one, when you're dealing with first, second generation college students, and I think we're emerging into an opportunity to have fourth and fifth generation college students amongst African Americans as a race, you find that there's nothing like a family going through something together. The struggles of the first generation student is that they're really doing it by themselves for the first time, and no one in the family really understands what to do. As you push that forward, you realize, wait, first generation and second generation students can actually become disciples of higher education and can really help recruit the family into an educational opportunity that they can go through it together. So whether it's a husband, whether it's a mom, an aunt, uncle, grandma, that one student can inspire a whole family to come back. If that's the case, then whether it's through graduate programs, weekend and evening programs, whether it's through early schedules and classes at 7 o'clock that allow you to go to class, then go to work and come back. We begin to not just educate individuals, but educate a family and ultimately a community.
Between Virginia Union University, Bethune-Cookman University, and Medgar Evers College, you've been in higher education for nearly 2 decades.
Yep.
And how have those experiences contributed to your presidency?
Well, I think the first 2 experiences for me, the first is born professionally at Medgar Evers College, City University, New York. That's a predominantly Black institution in the heart of New York City. Brooklyn, New York, cosmopolitan, and has gone through much change, and very, as you know, the ethnic diverse capital of the world, right? New York City. The second for me was SUNY Westbury, a part of the State University New York system, where I worked under Reverend Dr. Calvin O. Butts, also the pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, New York, who was also the president of the university. SUNY Westbury is a predominantly white institution that is multi-ethnic, and anybody who's been to Old Westbury, Long Island, understands the equestrian nature of that community, very different than Brooklyn, New York. Emerging in my professional career out of 2 state, one city university system, one predominantly Black and the other predominantly white, but led by Dr. Edison O. Jackson, who was a preacher, ordained minister, and a public advocate, and had been his whole career in higher education, public higher education. And then another pastor, who also a president, was the first time for me going through higher education that I was able to see a president and a spiritual leader at the same time, right? And someone who, 2 individuals who were able to lead with head, with heart, and with hand, which then led to this beautiful introduction into the higher education space, particularly HBCU world, through Bethune-Cookman University. And the story of Mary McLeod Bethune, ultimately in her travels from a missionary to Africa to ultimately founding Bethune-Cookman University in 1904 as a school for African-American young girls, and $1.50, and the whole story and impact, and enter to learn, depart to serve, and all of those elements really weighed heavily into my formation and my decision to stay in HBCU Black higher education space. Coming to Virginia Union University, much of the learning one of how do you serve African-American people today, right? 2, what the role of our institutions mean to the communities in which they reside. 3, how you educate not just individuals, but family and communities around you. 4, the moral obligations to service and the ability to stimulate not just education, but economic development in the community, because most of HBCUs are economic engines for the communities in which they serve. And then 5th, how to be a voice in the community for ideals that are higher than just those that come to your university, but representing the voice of marginalized, disenfranchised persons who may live around the campus, and ensuring that the spaces where people of color live, work, and advocate for are never, if you will, forgotten.
Both of us attended the recent inauguration of the new president of Wiley College, whom, during his remarks, acknowledged his HBCU presidential mentors. And whom are some of yours?
Well, first of all, you said something that we have to bring to fore, and really congratulate Dr. Felton for his major accomplishment, his second presidency, first inauguration, and it was an amazing time. Many of the people who you saw there, and I've mentioned first Dr. Edison O. Jackson, second Dr. Calvin O. Butts, third, a very important man that I share with Dr. Felton is Dr. Jimmy Jenkins Sr., who was the youngest president in the nation in the 80s at Elizabeth City State when he became the chancellor of his alma mater. I think there are 3 others who have really impacted me as I've entered into this space. Dr. Strickland, is just an amazing man. And the work that he has done over the years in higher education. Dr. Beckley has been there, and Dr. Kimbrough. Walter Kimbrough has been a man who, through his presence, has challenged me in the space to think critically, and not just me, other presidents also. I have a number of big brothers. One thing that Dr. Jackson did do, that he has prepared 13 presidents. I'm number 12, and he has 4 that are currently seated that have come under his mentorship. So my big brothers are Dwan Wormack, who's at Harrison Stowe, Dr. Makola Abdullah, who's at Virginia State, and Dr. Claudia Schrader, who's the president of Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn, New York. And so great cloud of witnesses. Dr. Artis has been there to answer calls and to guide. Dr. Smothers is also, and one who came out of Virginia Union University into his presidency, W. Franklin Evans, who's at Voorhees College, was the provost here and has done a great work. So great cloud of witnesses. I think as we reflect on the inauguration of Dr. Felton, what you realize is you can't be successful in this phase of black higher education if you don't call on those who have done the job before you and can help pour wisdom into you.
But you also, in that answer, mentioned a lot of the new generation of HBCU presidents like yourself. What are some of the challenges that your generation is facing, as well as opportunities that y'all are facing that the previous generation, like Dr. Strickland, like Dr. Beckley, did not challenge or did not have to face as opportunities? What are some of the differences?
Ooh. Oh, Brother Joyner, that's a difficult one. I think
sorry about that.
I think what I've realized in listening and being allowed entree into their wisdom is that there really isn't anything new under the sun. I think that's the first thing. One, you must always maintain the posture of humility, but yet with strength, right? 2, the connectivity to the student and the generation that you're called and you emerge to serve. I think that most of the presidents who are seasoned reach just a point in time where the generation that they're serving as he has evolved, if you will, outside of the generation that they were called to serve in the beginning of their presidency. So how do you continue to stay connected to the generation that you're serving? I think that whether it's the fiscal challenges, whether it's fundraising, whether it's dealing with personalities, whether it's dealing with your local politic, many of the issues are the same. And it's the drive, if you will, to maintain the relevance of HBCUs in a very different way that grips us today. I think for my colleagues and contemporaries, youthfulness is a double-edged sword, if you will, that on one side, I think historic to African-American leadership is this notion of ageism. So whether you're Dr. King, whether you're Haywood Strickland, whether you're Jimmy Jenkins Jr., it's always this notion of how old should you be, right? And so some people, and many of the presidents will tell you, Kevin Roman's another great one at FISC. You know, he will speak about it. Womack will speak about it, and others will talk about how people will always compare you to, oh, you can be my grandson, you can be my son, you can be this, and they will use age in a very interesting way to try to, if you will, limit authority. I think another struggle that you will have to always overcome as a contemporary and young president is your ability to move the student population in a way that their voices are heard proactively amongst alum, faculty, and other staff. Oftentimes, we want students to be quiet, and we want them to wait their turn, and we want them to earn their way. And what I've learned to say to our students is that leadership can't wait. The leadership for this generation and this time in which we're called, Brother Joyner, guess what? we can't keep them silent. Our people, the greatest moments in African American history in the U.S. have been when 18, 19, 20-year-olds stood up, whether it's through the various organizations that we know, from SNCC to anything else we want to call, any acronym. Young people had to step up and take authority and responsibility for the age that they're in. Those are, I think, the new challenges of awakening a new generation to lead. And what is the role of the college campus, and not just voting, but running. And that's my preliminary thoughts.
All right. Speaking of the role of the college campus, tell me about the economic impact that Virginia Union has on the city of Richmond.
Currently, we're standing at approximately $300 million impact. Our annual budget will always be between $40 and $50 million, now. We are constantly reshaping our role in our local community, particularly in Richmond. Here are some quick facts on Virginia Union University. The first is that we are the oldest historically Black college and university in the Commonwealth. We're the only HBCU, public or private, that's located in the capital. 3, we in the city of Richmond, we are the largest employer of African American, the largest private owned institution that employs the most African American and people of color, as the largest privately owned African American owned business in the city of Richmond. We have a large responsibility. And so the economic impact is one, but that economic impact also overflows to a health and wellness impact. And so most HBCUs, as you know, are located in areas that unfortunately are low income, poverty stricken, and need some type of resource renewal and participation by the city. We're located in the north side, that one economically would say is challenged. Those who live on our side of the tracks, unfortunately, live 10 to 15 years less than others in other parts of the community. And so we also are underemployed, and folk who reside on our side of the track are less likely to go to college, are less likely to have gainful employment and live above the poverty line. And the role of the university cannot be simply to import talent from outside of Richmond alone. While we do want to recruit outside of the city, we also understand our responsibility within the city, that there are structural political, social, educational structures within cities and locales that are not necessarily built for the success of young African American children in particular. And while diversity is one of our goals, right, to recruit more ethnic diversity from around the globe, we also know historically and by our mission, we have a responsibility to the African American. And so we are outwardly focused on making sure that the university, the campus, as you said, is safe, right? That it is a place where you can explore, find yourself, and perform academically, but to also make sure that the gates that surround us don't create borders to the people who we're called to serve. We've come up with a campaign called VEU is RVA, which is simply to remind Richmond, Virginia, that VEU since 1865 has been a part of the community, and that we are connected to it. The second thing that we do is that I want to host everything that the community has, civic organizations, try to get involved and represent and be a part and to serve on various commissions and councils and to provide a place for dialogue. 3, we just opened an urgent care center, and so I believe we're the first HBCU to do so. That's important with not only the poverty rate, but the unfortunately the morbidity rate being high, and not waiting for someone else to do it. So we partnered with a minority-owned, federally qualified health center called Capital Area Health Network, and transformed our health service area into urgent care. center. Many HBCUs around the nation, as you know, were a part of Black entrepreneurial activities. And whether it's the home of the first Black hospital in that area, the first Black high school, or whatever you want to call it, they did it. And we're just trying to re-energize our space by bringing back some of those historical elements that were significant for HBCUs.
It's very commendable, very commendable. In terms of higher education, the Commonwealth of Virginia is extremely competitive, especially for Black students with so many choices to choose from these days. So how does Virginia Union maintain its niche in terms of recruiting and enrolling students?
Well, I hope you don't mind, Brother Joyner, if I lean back on that just a little bit. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I don't believe it's a competitive space at all. I don't. I believe that we're in a blue ocean opportunity. The question is, what type of student do you want to recruit, and what type of HBCU do you want to be known as? I am very clear that the Brookings Institute and others have done some research, and we know nationally an African-American child will graduate with an average GPA of approximately 2.69. We also know statistically that African Americans will earn on SATs and math and English between average SAT scores of 700 to 900. We understand that approximately 80 to 85% of African Americans graduating from high school across America will earn between a 2.5 and a 3.5 high school GPA. And we also understand that based on our system of metrics, whether it's nationally, federally, that HBCUs are being forced into a space where they can only look at persons who graduate from high school with a 3.0 or higher. We also know that there's just no way to calculate in a higher education space for what is happening in public education, K through 12 systems across the nation. Mm-hmm. If we take all those numbers together, what you see is over the next 10 years, Generation Y will deal with, and Zers will deal with this whole notion of being forced into community colleges or other places because these elite, Ivy, and aspiring elite institutions do not see the value of pouring into students who, as I like to call, are underperforming. We deal in this notion of college readiness, and in college readiness, you say underprepared. And underprepared is usually those who don't hit statistical marks and are, if you will, tracked or pathway into different types of careers and different types of institutions. At Virginia Union University, we're focused on the 80%. The 80% who will graduate high school with 2.5 to 3.5 GPAs, who, by the way, Brother Joyner, guess what? Are not underprepared, they're underperformed. They just haven't awoken yet to their skills, to who they are as individuals. If HBCUs are going to be successful today, we must stand on our history and our success of dealing with those who historically are labeled statistically mediocre, marginal, and showing the world that they are not mediocre and marginal, that they are more than these numbers. And with a circle of support and with care, we can transform them. We've proven here at Virginia Union University that a 2.5 student can become a 2.8, 3.0 college GPA, that we can work with them and we will not let them go. One quick fact, and I'll give it right back to you.
You're good.
The largest gift that we've ever had in the United States by one individual was approximately $1.6 billion given by a man by the name of Michael Bloomberg to his alma mater. Right? And we all know who that is. We won't mention that name of that university because, all of us want to be like JHU, right? Mm-hmm. And the question is, what was his high school GPA? Well, they tell me it was approximately a 2.6. What was his graduating GPA from college? A 2.8. Well, go through all the lists at the leaders of the Fortune 500s. Do a roll call. How many of them graduated from college, number one? What were their high school GPAs and what were their college GPAs? If you go through the list, you realize that this world is run by the CEOs, leaders, the philanthropists, by people who necessarily weren't valedictorians, who didn't rise to what was the cream of the crop. And so that notion of simply taking those who have performed and enrolling them and transforming them in their school will cause us to miss all of the great leaders. Let's go through that. Denzel Washington to Martin Luther King to you can go back to Jesse Owens, to Booker T. Washington himself, to W.B. Du Bois, to all of these great leaders. We would not have half of the contributions to America, to the world that African Americans have made and Africans in the diaspora if we marginalized and pushed to the side and did not educate these students who have yet to awaken to the promise of their limitless future.
Let's talk more on that, because today's students are tomorrow's workforce. And so what is it, not just for HBCUs, but in particular for Virginia Union, what's in your secret sauce, your special sauce that takes them from point A to being labeled underperforming, point B in terms of being a Virginia Union graduate? Right?
I know. Everybody wants that secret sauce, and I'll give you some elements of it, but I certainly cannot reveal it all yet. I'm focused on solving the issue of Black generational wealth transfer for a Black middle-class population that either had the latchkey or helicopter over their kids, and they focused on their work. They had to go perform the surgeries. They had to go to the church and deal with the people. They had to go to the schools and move. And so they weren't able to, if you will, pour into their own children as much as they can. And they're silent and embarrassed at the 4th of July barbecue, at the church on Sunday, because they don't know where their child is going to go to school. They know that their child is exceptionally gifted, but the numbers are not panning out. There's only two ways to do it. One, you must provide a structured environment where students understand what it takes to be great. That's the first part of, if you will, our solution. Reminding them of who they are, right? And giving them a structure to, if you will, birth their higher level of self. The second one is really the role of spiritual formation and faith, and to help them realize why to be what they know they want to be and to embrace that fully, it takes a certain connectivity to the universe that is often rarely found, and whether no matter what you call that higher power, but to understand how some eternal laws of seeding and harvesting and reaping and giving and receiving, how these things just work out for your favor. And it's just by reading, being in the presence of, and that's a very important thing, right? To be in the presence of greatness. Our African proverbs all teach us it takes iron to shape iron, steel to bend steel. And if you're not a part of their life, and how you engage in their lives and guide them. Internships work because I'm sitting with someone who's doing it and not just someone who's talking about it. I'll give you a last one and leave it here. When you look at the shaping of the superhero in the mind of just generation, just looking at Marvel and what Marvel did, whether it's from Black Panther to Batman, and I think Batman is DC Comics, but whether it's Thor to the Incredible Hulk to and we can go Mr. America. I mean, you go through all of those, and Iron Man. What we have is a generation who sees the emergence of superhero who has some type of flaw, right? Whether it's a mom and daddy issue, whether it's I'm not big enough and I have to go into this thing and be transformed from this scrawny body to this muscular body to this inner rage that's held on by the Hulk, and it only comes up when he gets mad, and then the superhero comes out of this anxiety, fear, and depression, or whether it's this Black great country that nobody knows about, that is a secret until the danger comes and we have to solve the problems of the world. It's helping each young person find their superhero, to go through that fatal flaw and to fight through with a certain courage, strength, and vulnerability to find who they are inside. And so that's a little bit of our sauce, a little.
That was great. That was great. And I really appreciate this. I only have a few more questions to take up your time with, but a couple more things I want to hit right quick before we sign off with this. One of the things that I learned about Virginia Union, my research about this last week, what really impressed me was the partnership that you have with the Richmond Public Schools, where you are giving 50 scholarships to 8th graders for them to, for them to cash in, so to speak, when they get to, when they graduate from high school. What do you foresee as the impact that this will have on the campus and the city of Richmond?
Brother Joyner, I would tell you, I'm trying to lead a revolution in higher education. What I'm saying first through this is it's too late for us to recruit students at 12th grade. That there is no student that needs to be worried in the 12th grade of where they are going to college.
Yeah.
The next thing I'm saying is if the research tells us that we lose primarily African-American men between the 3rd and the 4th grade, and that absolutely by the 6th and the 8th grade, particularly African-American men, do not see clearly their role in society and where they're going in their future, we're being called morally to reach down into our public school networks and say to them, you have a future. Here is where you're coming. You're not going to worry about where your next step is. The second part of what you're saying is another social justice statement that I'm making. I'm partnering with Richmond Public Schools and going to the schools that have been deemed low performing.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, whoa, I'm not going to sit by as a president of the HBCU and let some folk who are in middle schools be written off as not going to be anybody. Because that's what underperform, low performing means, right? That the probability of them being successful is low. And they become tracked to certain jobs that keep them in the poverty line. And I'm disrupting that thought and saying, no, I'm identifying 50 of you who are being told that you can't be anything more than X. And I'm going to say to you, no, Virginia Union has a pathway for you to become even more than the people around you maybe think that you are. And look, that statement does not, if you will, reflect the number of teachers, guidance counselors, principals who are at these schools who really feel under-resourced, right? And that leads me to that next issue, that the partnership is not just in the scholarship, but also through Upward Bound, through our other, if you will, high school prep programs, bringing back youth summer camps on campuses. And this is unique to every HBCU who has done it, but doing it again, saying, no, those are some great strategies in the 30s and the 50s. Those were great strategies during Reconstruction. Those are great strategies during Jim Crow, that inclusionary politics cannot cause us to allow to fade away. And I'm also saying, I'm not waiting for the federal government to fund it. Then I'm going to fund it, and that I'm going to work with the community partners to reinvest in this. Richmond Public Schools has a partner in us and others, but we're partnering to ensure that at least 50 students a year do not have to believe a social politic that they will not be anything more than a society tells them they're going to be.
That's wonderful. That is absolutely wonderful, Doc. And on that note, tell me what advice you would give to today's high school seniors who are trying to decide between an HBCU or a non-HBCU for their college education, especially being that you've been on, as you say, both sides of the tracks.
Yeah. Well, I would say first to all of you young, great minds and scholars and leaders that are emerging who are trying to decide where do you go to spend 4 to 6 years of your life to become everything that you believe you can be. The first thing I have to say to you is fit, right? You must go to a place that represents the ideals and the values and has the capacity to deal with all of who you are. It's not just about the classroom. It's not just about the athletic fields and the courts that you play on, but it's about meeting your future husband and wife. It's about meeting your mentor and your champion that you'll talk to the rest of your life. It's about going to the baptisms and birthday parties of your line brothers and sorority sisters who you have met and you form relationships for your life. There's only one place that you can get all of that, and that's at a historically Black college or university. Of course, I'm biased, but bias are the balance beams to a great life, right? It's understanding that, to journey with God in the formation of yourself and to be forced to hear your inner voice, to be forced to hear something calling your name and not be ashamed about it, and to say the separation of state and church, to be forced to develop a holistic understanding of who and what you are is the only thing that is going to help you in days of trouble and trial. And so when you talk about how do I become great, and this is where I'll speak to African-American brothers and sisters specifically. African-American brothers and sisters, listen to me. If you want to become great, you must be in the presence of great. You must be able to speak to somebody who has been where you are and has triumphed. You all have someone at home who could not make it out the hood. But the question is, how do we form a commitment to the people who are in our neighborhoods, while at the same time not develop a mentality that we can't live amongst them and that we have to live out in a suburb and we can't be intimately involved in the next iteration of what our communities look like. There's something about being at a historically Black college and university that shapes this ideal. We need you. We need you to be a part of this revolution and renaissance. Find an HBCU near you. Find an HBCU that fits who you are, and let us once again create a great nation of people who believe in the power of melanin and the power of magical minds.
Dr. Lucas, I really want to thank you for this. This has been a great conversation, great feedback, great comments. I don't have any more questions, but I want to thank you for your time with this. And thanks for your words of wisdom. This has been fantastic, man.
Thank you so much. Keep doing the work, you and your dad and your family. Hey, we're all watching you and believing in what you all are doing. We're praying for your strength, and you keep fighting the good fight.
Appreciate that. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, brother.
Take care.
Let's take a quick break and learn about one of the Tom Joyner Foundation scholarship programs that helps students at historic Black colleges and universities. Here's an example of the Tom Joyner Foundation's success.
Hi, my name is Sonia Fry. I'm a senior business major from Detroit, Michigan. I would like to thank this university and the Tom Joyner Foundation for the scholarship. Upon completing my degree, I plan to hit the ground running to get into the music industry. Thank you so much, Tom Joyner Foundation. I really appreciate it.
To donate to the Tom Joyner Foundation, just log on to www.tomjoynerfoundation.org, and you can help a student continue their education at a HBCU.
Welcome back to HBCUbiquity, and thank you for joining us this week. You've heard from Dr. Felton and Dr. Lucas, and I want to shout out a few other like-minded HBCU leaders in the vein of who you heard today. Dr. Walter Kimbrough of Dillard University in New Orleans, and Dr. Michael Sorrell at Paul Quinn College, which, by the way, for those of y'all that did not know, even though Paul Quinn College is in Dallas, it was founded in Marshall, Texas, like Wiley, in 1872. New times require new leaders with new ideas. And one thing that's been consistent here on HBCUbiquity is that we discuss the HBCU student experience from the standpoint of traditional and non-traditional students. And we applaud and celebrate the diversity in terms of ages, backgrounds, and races that are enrolling in HBCUs. But we also applaud and celebrate that same diversity in HBCU leadership, especially as we go into a new decade. So thank you for listening to this week's episode. Do you have any suggestions for topics or guests? If so, drop us a line at HBCUbiquitypodcast.com. That's HBCUbiquity podcast HBCUbiquity.com. I'm Thomas Joyner Jr., and thank you for listening to this week's Conversation with a Purpose. Come back on next week for another episode of HBCU Ubiquity.
HBCU Ubiquity.